Accepting a secret marriage changed my life forever. At 53, I thought I knew all the faces of love. I thought I'd learned to decipher the signs, to read between the lines, to shield my heart from the storms I'd weathered over 3 decades of relationships. But when Ricardo proposed that Sunday afternoon, whispering softly that it would be just our moment, no fuss, no family, something inside me trembled. It wasn't joy. It was fear. Fear of that familiar feeling I knew all too well, that of being hidden. How many times had I been the woman who doesn't introduce herself, who stays behind the scenes, who exists only when it's convenient? As a dark-skinned black woman, I learned early on that some spaces reject us before we even try to enter. I learned that certain families whisper when we arrive, that some social circles create invisible but impenetrable barriers. But coming from the man who claimed to love me 2 years ago, those words sounded like a painful echo from the past. Ricardo held my hand with genuine tenderness, his eyes shining with sincere emotion. He spoke about intimacy, about special moments that don't need an audience, about how true love dispenses with ostentation and other people's approval. He mentioned famous couples who married in private ceremonies, and mentioned romantic films where secrecy made everything more intense. His words were as sweet as honey, but why then did I have a bitter taste in my mouth? For 3 long weeks, I carried that proposal like a stone in my chest. He insisted it was romantic, exclusive, special, as if we were creating our own unique love story. I tried to believe it, tried to feel the magic he described, but a persistent voice whispered inside me. Could this just be another elegant way of keeping me invisible? Do people really choose secrecy out of pure love? Or is there something much darker behind this seemingly romantic decision? The answer I discovered 3 months later completely shattered me, and then freed me in ways I never imagined possible. That Sunday was etched in my memory like a faded photograph. The golden afternoon light filtered through the living room curtains, the coffee grew cold on the table, and Ricardo spoke about our future with an excitement that contrasted with the emptiness I felt growing in my chest. He designed with words an intimate ceremony, just the 2 of us and a few neutral witnesses, away from the prying eyes and judgments of others. Sounded too perfect to be true. In the days that followed, I began to notice other details that had previously gone unnoticed. How he would change the subject when I mentioned introducing myself to his friends. How he always chose restaurants in distant neighborhoods when we went out together. How his social media remained completely devoid of any trace of my existence, while mine were filled with moments of ours. I began to notice the way some people around us reacted when we appeared together. Quick but penetrating glances, smiles that didn't reach their eyes, conversations that died down when I approached. It was like living in an invisible bubble, where I could see everything but never truly belong. How many women have experienced this? How many have felt that strange sensation of being loved in the shadows but rejected in the light? It's frightening how we manage to normalize situations that should alert us, how we transform red flags into misinterpreted romanticism. Perhaps that's why so many people choose to stay here, following each revelation about relationships that promise love but deliver only fragments of it. Because we recognize in others' stories the echoes of our own experiences. During those 3 weeks of reflection, one question kept running through my mind. What was really behind Ricardo's need to keep our union a secret? The answer would arrive in a way I never could have imagined. A phone call that would change everything. The connection came on a rainy Thursday, while I was preparing the dinner Ricardo wouldn't be sharing. Once again. The voice on the other end was feminine, hesitant, and filled with a sadness I recognized immediately because I'd felt that same lump in my throat before. She introduced herself as Marina, said she urgently needed to talk to me about Ricardo, and asked to meet at the cafe around the corner from my house later that afternoon. My heart dropped like a stone into a well. There's a terrifying moment in any woman's life when you know you're about to discover something you'd rather never know. It's like standing on the edge of an emotional precipice, knowing the next step will change everything forever, that there will be no turning back, that innocence will be lost forever. But you can't back down. You can't pretend the connection never happened, that broken voice doesn't exist, that the truth can be ignored indefinitely like a problem that disappears if we close our eyes. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes before the scheduled time, my hands shaking slightly. The place was nearly empty, just a few people focused on their laptops and hushed conversations. Each passing second felt like an agonizing eternity. When Marina finally entered, I knew immediately who she was, even though I'd never seen her before in my entire life. There was something about her careful gestures, the way she glanced around nervously, that mirrored exactly what I'd felt for months. That persistent feeling of being out of place, of not fully belonging in the life of the person I loved. She sat across from me with extreme caution, like someone carrying a secret too heavy for one person to bear. Marina was a white, blonde, elegant woman, the kind who fit perfectly into the refined social circles where I'd always felt like an out-of-place intruder. For a few eternal seconds, we simply observed each other in silence, two seemingly different women united by the same man and the same pain that still had no name. Then she spoke. And every word that came out of her mouth was like a sharp blade cutting through the carefully constructed illusions I had created about my relationship with Ricardo. What Marina told me in those first few minutes completely changed my perception of the last 2 years of my life. She wasn't a mistress I'd discovered by chance. She was his wife. His legal, official wife who lived in the same city as me, frequented the same places as me, and had probably seen me many times without me knowing who she really was. Ricardo had been married for 8 years. The words tumbled from Marina's mouth like painful confessions, each one rewriting my personal history. She spoke of how she discovered my existence through messages on his cell phone, of the elaborate lies he told to justify his absences, of how he had created a double life so convincing that neither she nor I suspected the full truth. But what shocked me most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing how Ricardo had used exactly the same words with me as he had with her. The same promises about a future together. The same arguments about relationships that don't need external validation. The same rhetoric about true love that dispenses with social formalities. Marina showed me photos on her phone. Photos of an elegant wedding with dozens of smiling guests, proud family members posing, a party that lasted until the early hours of the morning. As I looked through those images, a bitter realization dawned on me. Ricardo knew exactly how to organize public ceremonies when he wanted. It was never about preferring intimacy. It was always about who deserved to be presented to the world and who should remain hidden. At that moment, sitting in that simple cafe, looking at a woman who should have been my rival but had become my ally in pain, I understood something fundamental about secret relationships. It's at this point that many feel the urge to support this journey, leaving a silent signal that the message has touched them, because they recognize in our stories something they've experienced or feared experiencing. Secrecy never protects love. Secrecy always protects those who have something to hide. And what Ricardo was hiding was much more than a double life. Over the next 2 hours in that cafe, Marina and I pieced together a puzzle neither of us had realized we were putting together. Each piece she shared fit perfectly with fragments of my own experience, creating a complete and devastating picture of the manipulation we had endured. Ricardo didn't just lead 2 parallel lives. He had created 2 versions of himself, carefully tailored to what each of us represented in his life. With Marina, he was the traditional husband, a frequenter of social clubs, and a respected member of the local business community. With me, he was the modern, sensitive man who questioned social conventions and sought deeper, more authentic relationships. The cruel genius of his plan lay in the details. The work trips he concocted coincided precisely with the weekends he spent with me. The family commitments that prevented me from accompanying him were actually social events with Marina. Even the gifts he gave me, always without a card, always in generic packaging, made sense now. But there was something even deeper in that strategy, something that cut me deeper than the betrayal itself. Ricardo had consciously chosen to keep our relationship secret not only to protect his marriage, but because he knew a black woman like me would never be accepted in the social circles he and Marina frequented. The secret marriage proposal wasn't romantic. It was the only way he found to keep me in his life without having to face the discomfort of presenting me as his equal. Marina noticed my expression and grabbed my hand across the table. In that simple gesture, Two wounded women recognized in each other the same pain, but also the same strength. Because there was something Ricardo didn't know about us. We both knew exactly how to get revenge on anyone who toyed with our feelings. And the plan we began to hatch that afternoon would be far more devastating than he could ever have imagined. With each new clue, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet like treacherous sand. The note was no longer just a symbol of doubt, but the key to a labyrinth where each corridor revealed more shadows than light. And yet, there were moments when hope crept in, discreetly, like a timid ray of sunlight insisting on shining through a dust-covered window. I clung to these slivers of light, even if only for a few seconds, like someone taking a deep breath before plunging back into darkness. It was strange to realize how the revelation touched every corner of my life. The dinner growing cold on the table, the forgotten cup of coffee, the silent hallways of the house. Everything seemed charged with hidden meaning. Even the mirror in the bedroom reflected not only my face, but the invisible marks of an old weariness, of a struggle that was not just against a person, but against a destiny that seemed to want to keep me invisible. In this interplay between light and shadow, I learned to read signs that had previously escaped me. The muffled sound of a door closing, the vibrating of a cell phone hidden in a pocket, the calculated silence of someone hiding more than words. They were small fragments, but together they composed a bitter melody, a music I could no longer pretend not to hear. And yet, within me, there was also a flame that endured. It was fragile, almost imperceptible, but it was there. This flame told me that, no matter how much uncertainty I was surrounded by, there was still something to come. A gain hidden behind every loss. A revelation waiting in the darkness. I didn't know if I had the strength to make it through, but there was no turning back. Time seemed suspended, as if life were holding its breath along with me. I knew the next discovery wouldn't be just a detail, but something capable of completely transforming the course of my story. And it felt like standing before a closed door, with the key already in my hand, but without the courage to turn it. With each new detail I gathered, it was as if a silent painting was taking shape before my eyes. The pieces weren't just showing me the betrayal, but also revealing its scope, the ripples that rippled through my life like ripples after a stone thrown into a pond. Suddenly, gestures that seemed banal took on new weight. The constant lateness, the mysterious appointments, the averted glances in public. Each of these moments now became part of a pattern, a rehearsed choreography that I could finally see. This process made me realize that nothing is neutral. Every action has a reaction, even if it takes time to appear. I was beginning to measure not only what he did, but what he didn't do. It was like observing a plant. What grows on the surface only exists because something was quietly cultivated underground. And in my case, the roots were fake. The impact of this discovery wasn't limited to the relationship. I myself no longer walked down the street the same way. My steps became more attentive, my listening sharper. Even the people around me seemed to react differently. I noticed glances I'd previously ignored, silences that now felt like confirmation. The world hadn't changed. It was I who was beginning to see things differently. In this shift between effort and return, I realized my choices could no longer be naive. Every observation I kept was a test, and every confirmed clue was a result that pushed me forward, no matter how painful. The curious thing is that the more I saw, the more the feeling grew that the truth wasn't just mine. It had broader implications, as if a single pulled thread could unravel an entire, carefully woven web of secrets. And perhaps you felt it too. That strange mix of fear and clarity when you realize your life is about to change completely. If anything along this path triggers memories or reflections in you, please record them here, because sharing is also a way to release the weight we carry in silence. I knew, however, that I hadn't yet reached the limit. What I had in my hands was just the surface, and soon, deeper than I expected, something would emerge capable of turning everything upside down. Over time, I realized that the discoveries weren't just changing my view of him, but also of myself. It was as if I'd spent years looking into a foggy mirror, and suddenly someone had wiped it away, revealing a clearer yet harder to face image. Each confirmed clue, each detail revealed, was a ray of light piercing the darkness. But along with this clarity also came pain. The challenge of accepting that what I believed to be love might just be a carefully constructed illusion. I began to notice how this weight seeped into the little things. The coffee that grew cold without him even appearing. The plate left on the table. The unmade bed that, instead of sharing intimacy, became a witness to absences. These simple objects, which should have conveyed routine and comfort, became silent proofs, reminding me that his every gesture had a hidden layer I didn't yet fully understand. And yet, there was also an unexpected sense of strength surging within me, as if the pain, instead of simply breaking me, was molding me into another form, firmer and more conscious. It was contradictory. On the one hand, the clarity that liberated. On the other, the uncertainty that surrounded me like a fog. Progress and obstacle walked side by side, and I needed to learn to navigate this narrow road, where each step could be both progress and a stumble. The contrast intensified in every detail. In the rare moments when he showed concern, I no longer saw tenderness, but calculation. In the silences, there was no longer just distance, but an emptiness too heavy to be casual. It was as if his every gesture were a mask, and I began to see the cracks. This feeling of partial clarity, of being in the midst of a greater revelation, stayed with me like a constant breath on the back of my neck. I knew I was about to achieve something decisive, something that would not only confirm my suspicions but also forever change the way I viewed the world. And yet, there was fear. The fear that the truth, when it emerged in full, would be even more devastating than I was prepared to bear. With each passing day, I felt as if I were living inside a house that no longer belonged to me. The walls held memories of a love I'd believed to be solid, but now echoed only the emptiness of broken promises. It was strange. The same room where we'd laughed so often now felt cold, as if the windows no longer let in the light. The light was bright outside, but inside me loomed the shadow of a truth that was slowly approaching, unbearably clear. This transition presented me with an intimate dilemma: trust the fragments I'd gathered or doubt them, lest I shatter my heart forever. My mind sought refuge in doubt, but my body responded to the truth in silence. My stomach churned when he arrived too late. My heart raced when his cell phone vibrated in the middle of the night. It was as if my own body was screaming what my mouth hadn't yet dared to say. And at the same time, there were moments when memories of past gestures came back like flashes of lightning. An unexpected smile, a strong embrace, a night of complicity. These flashes came like brief lights in the darkness, but they quickly faded, making the contrast between what had been and what was now revealed even more evident. The trust one had cultivated for years became a devastated field, filled with deep scars that could no longer be erased. I also realized that the transformation wasn't just internal. The world around me seemed to react. The looks of neighbors, the attitudes of friends, even the silence of family members carried clues that something was wrong. It was as if everyone had noticed the cracks before me, but no one had dared to name them. This feeling suffocated me, being at the center of a story that everyone seemed to sense, but that only I experienced with piercing intensity. The progress of my clarity was always accompanied by an even greater challenge. Each revelation brought me closer to an answer, but also widened the abyss before me. And deep down I knew the next piece would come not as a discrete detail, but as a devastating blow, ready to tear away the veil that still allowed me to breathe. The final revelation came not like thunder, but like a silent blade piercing the air. It was confirmation of everything I feared, but also the mark of an inevitable transformation. Suddenly, what had previously seemed like a disconnected fragment coalesced into a clear image, and the pain of seeing the truth was accompanied by an unexpected sense of freedom. I was no longer a prisoner of deception, no longer anyone's shadow. I stood before the ruins, but still standing tall. It was like walking down a dark corridor for months, and finally pushing a door that opened onto a bright field. The light didn't erase the marks of darkness, but it showed me that I could move forward without fear of stumbling into the invisible. And in this journey, I understood that every tear I shed was also a seed, because from the pain sprouted a strength I would never have discovered without walking this path. The contrasts were starkly revealed. The challenge of bearing the weight transformed into an intimate conquest. The previous silence became a firm voice. Uncertainty gave way to decision. It wasn't a noisy victory. There was no audience to applaud. But within me, a force so intense echoed that it needed no witnesses. This is true victory. When we realize we no longer need to prove anything to those who tried to diminish us. And perhaps that's why sharing this journey is so valuable. Because each gaze that accompanies these words isn't just a spectator, but part of a space where stories intertwine and scars are recognized. If you felt this transformation reverberate within you, leave a silent sign of support, like, comment, subscribe. Not as an obligation, but as a gesture of belonging to a truth that can also be yours. Today, looking back, I see not only the pain of betrayal, but the greatness of having walked through the fire without letting it consume me. Life has taught me that kindness is not synonymous with weakness, and that silence does not mean submission. I carry within me the certainty that those who try to extinguish our light end up revealing even more the brightness we resist maintaining. And it is in this brightness, rebuilt from the ashes, that I find my greatest victory.